thanks for being here, everyone, and thanks for voting for the Two Truths and a Lie. But now let's get to the content. So without further ado, guys, don't gotta listen to me anymore. Happy to welcome you all to Method Schmethod. And Jamie and Eva, it's over to you.
Thanks, Sarah. All right. So,
hi, I'm Eva.
And I'm Jamie, and I'm the Director of Product Design at TotallyMoney.
And I'm the lead user researcher at TotallyMoney.
And as Sarah said, just a little bit of background about who we are. TotallyMoney is a free credit score app based in the UK. Our focus is on the 20-odd million underserved and the 9 million financially fragile adults in the UK. And at the moment, this makes up about 1 in 2 people, and it's growing, especially with the current economic climate that we find ourselves in. And so we help our customers build better financial futures by putting them in control of their own data so it works for them and not against them. Enough about that. So what is our talk about today? As people who do research, I think we often have a tendency to think that the practice or the methods will speak for itself. That surely if we demonstrate best practice tools and methods, we'll get instant buy-in for the value of research, and that our stakeholders will care as much about, or as much as we do, about the opportunities that are available. I think we also expect this to happen overnight. In our experience, sadly, of introducing research and building out a function, we've found that simply it's really not this simple. So, in fact, building trust and influence for a new practice in an existing company takes a lot of time. So we've gone from doing no user research to having research as somewhat of a strategic enabler. But this has taken us around about 4 or 5 years, right? And there's been several different stages throughout this. Today, we're going to talk through 2 of our eras throughout this kind of research journey. So kind of from where I joined and having designers doing research through to where Eva joined and having an actual researcher doing the research. So we're separating this out into kind of the introduction of research and then the building out of a function. I think the one thing, obviously we've had a lot of learnings along the way, but the one thing underpinning all of this stuff has not been the methods, it's not been the outputs, it's actually been about how we've built trust and influence along the way. So that's kind of what our talk is going to be about today. So introducing research and going back to 2018. So I was hired at TotallyMoney as one of the first UX designers that had been employed. The company at the stage was about 10 years old. There were about 50-ish employees, and UX was, a really new function. We sat under product, and I think I was hire number 2, and we had a team of about 3 UXers for a long time. I think I was pretty idealistic, and I'd come from some very, previous companies I'd come from had very high design maturity levels. And so I came in and realized that we didn't have any user research. We weren't doing any user research. And I made a few assumptions. First of all, that no user research meant that we had no customer insight, and that everybody would automatically buy into the value of research because it's obvious, right? I assumed that because I'd been hired as a UX researcher, that people were just ready to hear me and more like, oh, you're a UX designer. People were ready for this practice to exist. And so I kind of became a little bit evangelical. We need to do all the journey maps, and we should do personas because they're so valuable, and we should try a diary study. But I think all of this kind of evangelicalness didn't necessarily buy me a lot of friends. Because the reality is that insights did already exist. Our company was 10 years old, and I think each team definitely had a different view, or had a view of who the customer was. It's just that they had a different lens of how they viewed them. As an example, our marketing team had done a lot of focus groups, and so they knew our customer really well through market research and that kind of thing. Our product team had done a lot of data segmentation, which have journey data and A/B click tests and that kind of thing. And I think that me shouting from the rooftops that we didn't know our customers or that we needed kind of more research to find out more, it just didn't really sit very well, because there was actually a lot of insight that I could utilize. And the reality is that our stakeholders actually had it pretty good, and they didn't really see a problem that needed solving. They had existing processes that worked, and I think what I said before, design wasn't at a very high level of maturity at that stage. So we'd have stakeholders, product managers, commercial managers defining a feature idea. Design was kind of expected to like color it in. They'd then hand off to the tech team. The tech team would build it, and it was like this perfectly well-oiled machine. And then every now and then would validate it, with an A/B test, would get some data to confirm that the thing we'd built was right. It was perfectly streamlined. So actually, what I found is that our desire to do research was just adding new steps into an already well-oiled machine. I like to call this the kind of black box of design. We were still getting the same feature ideas into the pipeline, but instead of us just coloring them in, we were kind of saying, let's discover some stuff, let's validate things before it gets to build, let's go through the double diamond and do all of this kind of like exciting design stuff, And the reality is that this just led to longer timeframes, unknown outcomes, and at the end of the day, we had unhappy stakeholders. And I think what then happened was that we started having people in the company saying things like, we don't have time to do discovery. There was a lot of pushback. We just need to reskin it. Why do you need to redesign it? And everybody's favorite, can't you just do the UX? And so where we were at is that we needed to prove the value in adding new steps to a process that already worked well. And talking about methods and outputs and personas and journey maps wasn't really going to help us, because our organization wasn't ready for personas or journey maps or lengthy discovery interviews. To them, we already knew enough about our customers and our product. So for us, we had to prove that there was value in learning more. And what this meant for us was that speed was a problem, right? So what we ended up doing was focusing initially on unmoderated usability tests. We could have designers chucking up a test and getting results back the same day. And usability tests are tangible, they're not abstract, and they're easy to talk about. So we were able to get really actionable findings in a short space of time. And while we would have liked to have done more, we just weren't ready for it yet. And at the end of the day, some insight is better than no insight. Pick your battles. So I think what we found is that getting time to do the research eventually allowed us to focus on how we share the things that we learned and shout about the wins we had. I like to call this doing the propaganda. And this in turn then helped us build some strong allies in really unexpected places. I think often we can assume that it's the product and tech teams that we need to get buy-in from. But actually for us, commercial, compliance, they were key in helping us drive demand for user research. And over time, by highlighting our wins and building alliances, we were able to get better traction for other kinds of initiatives. So for example, when we launched our version of continuous discovery interviews, we had huge turnouts from different departments coming to watch the interviews. Like our compliance team. And this simply wouldn't have been possible a year earlier without building all that trust from our new allies. It helped us to build traction. And I think the key thing is that spending time on building these relationships, doing the propaganda, eventually meant that we went from a place where people were pushing back on research and things that we wanted to do, to actually requesting our help to find out more. We had designers and product teams being empowered to actually do their own research, and getting changes made to features was not an uphill battle anymore. And then after a long time, this then led us to get the business buy-in to hire our first real user researcher.
And that's my cue. We're now in October 2021. So about 3 years since Jaime had first thought about creating some personas and introducing research to TotallyMoney. And by this point, TotallyMoney had about 90 members of staff. And I joined the product design team. And at that time, the design team was about 10 people. So we'd grown massively over those, 3 years. And I came in from an organization that had lots of researchers working on lots of products and services. And it was researchers doing research. So it was researchers doing research, not product designers. And now I was going to be a team of one with the task to build up a function. But I wasn't yet really sure what that actually meant. So I looked at, where do I fit in with this? And this is what I found. This was the context I found. Product designers who were doing unmoderated usability testing to validate designs. And they worked in fast-moving missions, working independently. And I also found that they had very different levels of experience and confidence in doing research. So research was already happening. This wasn't about me taking over and doing all of the research. There was a few good positive things that were already happening. Someone had set up a research plan template and I could just rejig it a bit. There was the weekly discovery interviews. And so there were some foundations there, but I knew other foundations, or what I thought were foundations, were missing. So some foundational research, the personas, the customer journey maps. And I knew that research could do more than just validate designs. So for me, that meant I needed to enable people, in this case, product designers, to do good quality tactical research themselves, to free up the time for strategic and foundational research that I could then do. So instead of becoming the researcher for all things, I became the coach. I started coaching the product designers. I set up some research processes that would help designers know when they should think of research and what they should think about at each stage. I helped them kind of solidify that knowledge in kind of one-to-one coaching sessions. I had a weekly research office hour. And also product designers got some interview practice in weekly customer interviews. And these were separate from kind of their day-to-day mission work, which helped them feel kind of less nervous about doing the research in the first place. And yes, this coaching was quite time intensive, but it was starting to pay off. By putting some processes in place and being kind of present in mission work, I had made thinking about research more of a habit for the designers. Research was now everywhere without me having to be everywhere doing the research. And product designers were feeling more confident. They were becoming more confident in their abilities to do research. They could now do more themselves. And they also showed more initiative in trying out different approaches in testing their ideas. And I also just realized the research was getting better. It was just doing better quality research. And this had the effect I had hoped. This freed me up to do other things. More time and opportunity for me to focus on strategic research. One thing, for example, I was able to do was work with a team on coming up with ideas that utilized open banking. And as part of that, I finally got to do some discovery work on our customers' attitudes towards sharing data and open banking. So exactly the type of research that I hoped that I'd be able to do. And I think coaching allowed me to do that work because I wouldn't have had the time if I'd started to take over and do some more tactical stuff. But soon I realized while I had focused a lot on coaching the product designers, there was kind of another important aspect of my role that I had neglected a bit. I saw this great tweet the other day by Erica Hall, who's the author of Just Enough Research. If you don't follow her on Twitter, I would recommend you do. About design research essentially being sales. And while I kind of knew this already, I feel like I had to relearn that again. In my first year, I think this was probably at TotallyMoney, this was probably my biggest learning again. I did 2 big strategic research pieces in my first year. And the way they were received by senior leaders in the organization could not have been more different. So the first one was that discovery piece that I mentioned, the discovery piece on open banking. And the fact was that this was the first time this kind of discovery work had been done to come up with product ideas. So usually, as Jamie mentioned earlier, the product ideas had always kind of come from a product manager or a senior decision maker somewhere else in the business. This could be, for example, the head of commercial. And when I presented my findings on open banking to these senior stakeholders, they were pushing back against my findings, with one of the stakeholders actually questioning that my qualitative data constituted valid findings at all. I had focused so much of my time in coaching the people who were doing research, the product designers. I hadn't really thought enough about the people who weren't doing the research, but who were vital decision makers in the organization and in the product development process. I had not really taken the time to understand their perspectives and priorities, as like Erica mentions in here. And that's exactly what she says here. It's like, what happened is the findings are likely to be ignored. These were people like the head of the commercial team who did not have contact with product design or product designers or user research on a regular basis, and who, as it turned out, had a very different idea of what constituted a valid research finding. I kind of wrongly assumed that the sales, or the propaganda, as Jamie has called it, were not necessary anymore. After all, these people hired me, right? So they must think UX research is valuable. But I'd not taken enough time to understand kind of the context, the perspectives of, for example, the head of commercial. And now I was asking them to trust the kind of research that had up to this point not really been done at TotallyMoney. And discovery and strategic research are by their nature often a bit more abstract. The findings are less tangible than the findings of usability tests, something like users can't find this button in this design. So the type of propaganda that we had to change a bit as well. And if I wanted to build that trust and buy-in for more strategic studies, I had to think more about my decision makers' point of view. So compare this now to my experience let's say about 6 months later. So I ran a UX baseline study on our native app. So it was literally a study to understand the baseline of what's the user experience like of our app. Can people do the top tasks on our app, and what's their experience of doing them? And the reception to that study could not have been more different. I did not get any pushback. The previously so skeptical stakeholders immediately saw the benefit. Like, the app was something really tangible. Everyone kind of knew, everyone had also their area that they were involved in. And it was tangible. They could see what the experience looked like. They could see what was not working. And I also gave them concrete steps on how to improve it. And the nice, what that led to was actually that people invited me to their team meetings, like heads of teams. So for example, the head of tech said, please, can you come along and do another presentation for us? And the same happened with marketing and a few other teams. And the CEO even said something that I think I'm going to frame and hang up on my wall is, I have rarely/never read something so insightful and actionable about our app. Yeah, that warms me. And it kind of what this led to is that now actually research kind of pops up in all different places, or talking about research pops up in all these places. Like, people say sentences like, we already know from research that our customers do X, or in the baseline research, Eva found this. And my personal highlight was the CEO making a meme out of my research findings. So yeah, what's next now? We've got a UX baseline. We have some product designers that are doing research on a regular basis with our customers, and they're using different tools and approaches. We've got basic processes and templates, and now senior stakeholders welcome different styles of research as well. So now we're at the stage where we want to increase the impact research has in the product development process. And I think this is where it gets messy again. Because we know where we want to go, right? Like, we know we want research not to just validate ideas later. We want research to inform the ideas. But we don't really know exactly how we're going to get there yet, or we don't really know what the stage needs to look like. We do know that very likely we will have to change our approach again. What's worked for us so far will probably not work for us for this next stage. One thing that will definitely have to change is me being the coach, because it's such a time-intensive practice, and being so hands-on with that probably won't be able, like, that won't get me to that next stage of research and forming the ideas. What we'll do, I think, is we'll focus on our biggest strategic opportunities. For us, that is new feature ideas and a review we're currently doing of our information architecture, like things where we know these are strategic goals that already exist, and we know that those are our ins. And yes, there are things we still want to do, the personas, the journey maps, but we need to attach those outputs, those artifacts, to bigger strategic goals if we want them to have any kind of actual tangible impact. So what did we learn? Yeah, really, in a nutshell, we really thought it would go like this. But as you've seen, it kind of went more like this. And I really hope we're on that upward trajectory and we're still continuing, but we might dip again, who knows? And yeah, and all of this, as we said, this took longer than we probably thought. And yeah, this really, research maturity is not a neat process. Embedding research into your organization takes time, and it doesn't look the same for every organization, for everyone. And that's precisely why it requires you to meet your company where it's at. There is no use in trying to give them journey maps if they don't know how to use them. I think very philosophical. Change is constant. Always adapt your approach and your propaganda. And oh yeah, and apparently we're not the first ones saying this. So I'll leave you with this collection of inspirational change is constant quotes. So you can return to this in your hour of need when you're stuck in the messiness of embedding research in your organization, and you remember you're not alone. We're probably right there with you. Thank you.